Let's get started. So, welcome everyone to BIOVIT Live. Today's webinar is titled Are Natural Claims Misleading Consumers? My name's Ema. I'm a registered nutritionist and head of nutrition at BioVit and hosting these BioVit Live webinars, which are designed to have some really interesting discussions and conversations in the field of nutrition, nutrition science, and the food industry. Today, we are diving into a very well debated term in terms of food and supplements, the term natural. So, despite its widespread use, there isn't really a clear, universally accepted or regulatory definition, which can create a lot of challenges for consumers in understanding what's in their products, for businesses knowing what to put on their products, and policymakers too. So, in this discussion, we're looking at key questions, including should natural claims be legally protected? What does natural really mean to consumers? Are companies misleading consumers? And what does the future hold for natural claims in the food industry? And to help us unpack all of these questions, I'm really delighted to have Antonio, who is a project and policy officer at Safe Food Advocacy Europe. Antonio played a key role in a consumer report on a survey of 5,000 European consumers that SAFE published at the end of last year, which was really interesting and focused on the transparency in food products, including a lot of the pressing questions around the use of the term natural. So I'm really looking forward to discussing the findings of that survey and that report with Antonio. So let's get into it. As far as I'm aware, in the UK and the EU, there aren't really clear regulations around the use of the term natural. So I wondered if you could clarify that, Antonio, and what regulations do currently exist for that term.
Of course. First of all, thank you, Emar, for the introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here today. What we identified in our work at SAFE, both in our natural campaign, which was summarized in a report we published in 2020, and in the consumer survey you mentioned from November 2024, what we identified, generally speaking, is really a lack of a uniform, standardized definition of natural for general food labeling. What we have in the EU are several legal instruments that touch upon the concept, but they don't really provide a broad legal definition that can really protect these natural claims as well. For instance, we have the regulation on health, on nutrition and health claims that essentially covers the term natural, but only when it comes to nutritional claims, such as, for instance, naturally low in salt. If it actually meets the condition, the food inherently meets the condition, then it's applied, but it doesn't really cover the food product in general, such as characteristics, components, origin. So it still leaves quite a consistent gap. In terms of definition, what we find is also the regulation on flavorings, which provides a natural flavoring substance definition, but this is also only applies to the context of flavoring, and it's not broad. We also have the REACH regulation, for example, which defines substances occurring in nature, but it's specifically limited to chemicals, not for finished foods. So as you can see here, there is a consistent gap on providing a well-standardized, broad definition what natural really means, which is what we identified in our survey. And that's what essentially consumers were telling us in their responses, that they are actually quite confused about this, that there is a need for regulatory clarity.
Okay, so there's some form of regulation on some specific things like flavorings, but there isn't a more broad definition or regulation, which is
Exactly.
confusing, as you can understand, for consumers.
Consumers really demand stricter regulation. For example, in our survey, you can see that close to 90% of the respondents actually indicated that legislation should require the brands to disclose the presence of synthetic or natural substances in the finished food products. And also, most of them also want labels to differentiate clearly between natural and synthetic additives, vitamins, colorings, flavorings.
Hmm.
So there is a widespread consumer demand that we identified towards the need indeed for stricter oversight. And it is our perspective that this should not limit industry innovation in any way. If anything, it can actually provide a marketing advantage for those companies that actually disclose honestly and properly their natural lining processes when it comes to when it comes to food products, right?
Hmm.
So if we identify this trend with consumers clearly wanting to be more informed, clearly wanting to read transparently what they are buying, then companies should take that into account and use that also as a way to improve consumer trust, to improve the relationships with consumers. I think this can only benefit brand loyalty as well. It's something that companies should really take into account.
Hmm. Yeah, it could really set companies apart who are really doing that sort of fully natural thing.
Indeed.
So what do you think from the research consumers actually believe natural means when they see it on a label, in terms of actually what it means and also their trust of the label?
Mhm. Actually, from a survey, what became really apparent is there are really major differences in how Europeans interpret natural, right? And our survey focused on 5 different countries. And it also accounts for national differences. And despite these differences, the trend is always the same. The fact that there is confusion, the fact that they want more clarity on this, which is also quite relevant. Um, but essentially, they associate it to different things. For instance, some respondents associate natural to the absence of chemical or synthetic additives. I think it was two-thirds of the respondents who really thought that natural means not produced or transformed via chemical or synthetic processes. 2 in 3 survey consumers also deemed natural as GMO free.
Hmm.
So absolutely believing that any genetic modification takes products really out of this natural category, right? And generally, a moderate number of respondents also thought that a minimal physical processing would be acceptable, meaning, for example, some physical transformations like cutting, drying, pasteurization, that would be fine and it will still keep a product natural. So just to give a general overview, these are indeed the trends about consumers' interpretations of the term natural. But there are many discrepancies, and indeed, this is why we also need regulatory clarity, and this is why we need companies also to disclose honestly and transparently, so that consumers can be always informed and can make their own choice.
Hmm. Interesting. I saw in the survey that people only 4.9 times out of 10 do people actually read labels on food products. And then for those who do read them, 2 out of 3 said that they don't actually believe that what's on the food label is completely transparent. Um, is that surprising, do you think? That shocked me.
Indeed, as you can see from the survey, I think it was especially from the French respondents, close to 80% showed really relevant consumer skepticism on these
Mm.
labels, which is why we believe that companies should really take an interest in this and improve their transparency, really make this a priority for the future. When it comes to reading labels, for example, even if not all consumers read their labels, well, first of all, some consumers are very confused and they also really struggle with the technical terminology that you often find on these labels, and especially the small fonts that are
Hmm.
often used. These are already some things that should be tackled to improve the overall transparency on food labeling, to also help consumers read more and be more informed. Then they often complained about not really being able to assert from the labeling whether synthetic ingredients were present. They really had no way right there and then in the labeling to really assert this. Um, and in general, what we find is that consumers really aim to get more clarity. That is it. The issue here is being transparent. So this does not surprise us actually, because this
Hmm.
is what we have been advocated for a long time. Um, it's not about being against synthetic ingredients, right? It's
Hmm.
about really giving consumers the choice to be properly informed and be able to make their own purchasing decision. And this is something you can also see from the survey because consumers are not opposed to buying, for example, vitamins obtained synthetically, but they simply don't want it to be hidden from them. They want it to be disclosed on the actual labeling.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess with the labeling, it's a bit of a chicken and egg in terms of if the label was more clear and there was a standardized way of showing these things and making it clear what is synthetic and what is natural, people would probably be more likely to read it and therefore trust it. But at the moment, there's a lot of mistrust in
Mhm.
the labeling because it's so confusing. So there's a lot to figure out there. Um, I thought it was interesting the point about people not being able to tell if something is synthetic. Um, and I saw in the survey, 83% of European consumers found it important to know whether their vitamins in a product are natural or synthetic, which stood out to me because BioVit are really passionate about natural versus synthetic vitamins and minerals and just being transparent about it and engaging consumers and showing sh consumer awareness. And it is really hard. Well, at least in the UK, I haven't looked at other European countries' labels for the vitamins and minerals, but you can't tell whether the fortified product contains a synthetic vitamin D or a natural form. How is it labeled in Europe? Because in the UK, it just says vitamin D, and you don't have to say anything else.
Yes, indeed, this is kind of the problem in Europe as well as we mentioned earlier. The regulations that we currently have touch upon the concept of natural and on the presence of synthetic ingredients, but they don't really require legally for it to be transparent on the labeling, right? And this is what we are arguing for. This is what also with our survey we are trying to get out there, the need to really disclose whether, first of all, synthetic ingredients are present in the finished product and how the product was also obtained, naturally or synthetically. And as I also mentioned earlier, especially in the case of vitamins, as you just mentioned, even in our survey, you can clearly see that the market share for vitamin still remains quite large despite consumer skepticism. So this means that, as I said, consumers are not opposed to synthetic vitamins per se, right? But they simply want transparency about what is there, how the finished product was obtained. And this is currently lacking. Even
Hmm.
in the EU, this is lacking. And we fully believe this should be a focus for future regulation. There is a clear need here. There is a clear demand for consumers that is not being answered.
Hmm.
And it's an issue. It's an issue for consumers as well as for companies, as we also already discussed,
Hmm.
because companies are also confused and they cannot really even take advantage of proper natural labeling. Um, and this is something that we indeed need to work on.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that consumers just want to know, um, even though, products are fortified with synthetic vitamins and minerals, that's just how it has been so far. There's not been another option. So it's interesting to hear that people are aware of that. Because I think in the UK, or at least a lot of the companies that we're working with, not many consumers are as aware of that in the UK, I'd say. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear that there's a bit more awareness in Europe. So thinking about consumers and their sort of motivation to buy products, I saw in the survey that 86% of consumers were more likely to buy a product that's labeled as containing natural ingredients. How does that term natural compared to other terms like organic or free from additives in terms of consumers' preference to purchase a product?
Mhm. No, indeed, from a survey, it appeared clear that the term itself, natural, despite not really being clarified, regulated, as we discussed, actually holds significant importance for European consumers. And you can see in our surveys that it's considered alongside or even above other labels, such as organic or non-GMO.
Wow.
And actually, I think it was 69% of European consumers that really ranked the presence of natural ingredients even higher compared to nutritional values and the origin of the products. And yet, there is a lot of misuse, as we said, around the term natural. And this just increases the confusion for consumers because consumers want to buy something that is properly natural, right? That perhaps does not contain synthetic ingredients, but they have no true way to make that fully informed choice when they buy their food products. And this is in sharp contrast to some other labels. For example, we can see that at least in the EU, organic is much more protected and legally defined.
Hmm.
There are specific rules on farming practices, what is permitted, what is not. By contrast, natural really lacks, as we said, a binding, uniform legal definition. So consumers, obviously, they see organic as more verifiable compared to natural, and therefore they don't trust any natural claim that they might see on the products, even though they would like to indeed buy um, natural products, right? The same goes for other labels such as non-GMO, much more strictly regulated in the regulatory landscape in Europe. Producers must often ensure, certify that indeed there was no genetic modification. And in our survey, 2 in 3 consumers actually equate, as we said, the term natural with the absence of GMO. So this
Hmm.
is also really important. It really shows you how there is a need to clearly distinguish, clearly clarify legally as well.
Yeah. Do you think, because obviously, yeah, things like the organic trust mark and putting things like vegan and are a lot more regulatorily controlled. Do you think the presence of a few of these is enough to show a consumer that a product is natural, or do you think there needs to be a specific natural regulation?
There needs to be something for sure more specific.
Hmm.
And even if, for instance, there are quite some challenges in coming up with a broader natural definition, right? At the very least, what we believe should be done is to clearly disclose the presence of synthetic ingredients at the very least.
Hmm.
As long as this is done, then consumers really have a chance to make a properly informed decision. What we always say is without information, there is no choice. So if you are omitting one crucial piece of information, then consumers are being misled. And this is also in direct contrast with another regulation that we have for the information to consumers, which clearly mandates that consumers should not be misled. And therefore, this is what needs to be done. This needs to be added. This needs to be clarified at the regulatory level to really be able to allow consumers to make more informed choices.
Hmm. And then what do you think brands and marketing can do to help shape those perceptions of natural? Should they take responsibility to educate consumers on if there was a new sort of regulation, or is it up to just having a regulation? What do you think?
Mm. Well, of course, I think we've established that there is a responsibility from regulators
Yeah,
to do more to clarify.
yeah.
But of course, it is our perspective that brand industries should also do their part, right? I think the process can also be quite sped up, and it can lead us towards progress if there is also an ethical responsibility from their side, if there is the willingness to be truly honest in the labeling. And as I said, this can be an advantage for them. This doesn't have to be something imposed upon them, right? There
Hmm.
is no reason why clearer regulation should be an obstacle. Companies can use this as a market advantage. They can use this to verify their own claims. So consumers are therefore more informed transparently, and they have more trust. You also address consumer skepticism that way. It's really a win-win situation. So I don't think there is any kind of obstacle in that sense. It doesn't have to be opposed. Industries, brands, they can actually give an example and improve consumer relationships in the meantime.
Yeah. No, it completely makes sense. And with sort of guidance from policy and regulation
Of course.
to sort of start it off, and then businesses taking that ethical responsibility to tell consumers what's in their products would be an ideal situation. And obviously that's what consumers really want.
Yeah, they do.
So are there any upcoming regulatory changes that might be happening to impact the way natural claims are used?
There are prospects for revisions also of some of the regulations we have mentioned beforehand. With Safe, what we will attempt to do is exactly continue our work that we have started with the natural campaign, with the survey that we published in November 2024, and really attempt to engage European policymakers and really show them where the gap is, where the gap lies, show them the demand for consumers. And in this way, we really hope to engage with them and have some progress on this, be it clarifications or additions to the current regulations that have this gap, or maybe another one, as long as we can see some progress being made and the demand for transparency from consumers being met.
Hmm. Yeah, brilliant. Um, okay, is there anything else that you would like to add from the report or anything that Safe are doing that you want to share?
Of course, I would like first of all to thank BioVit for the invitation, and we encourage everyone to read our survey. As you also mentioned, it's quite interesting as it reveals many trends. It reveals many specific demands and opinions from consumers that cannot and should not be ignored by policymakers. Uh, and in the end, as we also discussed, happier consumers also means improved relationships with brands. Therefore, this is really something that we invite everyone to really reflect upon and also collaborate with us so that we can really make an effort and have some progress in the future.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I think what you're doing is so great, and the report is really interesting. I would encourage people to take a deep dive because there's something that probably really resonates with everyone in that report. I'll just see if there's any questions in the Q&A, if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask. One quick question. Um,
Mhm.
until there are sort of more regulations, um, how can food companies who want to be transparent and want to be honest use the term natural in a trustworthy way to their consumers?
Mhm. Thank you for the question. This is indeed a good question, and
It
I
is.
think it links very well to what we discussed just shortly before. Of course, as we wait for regulatory clarity, companies can actually take the lead, right? As well, they can provide examples, and they can start um, this process in terms of being more honest in how they disclose. Therefore, especially if these companies are really focusing on, let's say, natural product lines, then I guess we encourage them to to, as we said, really disclose that there are no synthetic ingredients, or in case that there are, to really disclose which ones are there, and do so in the simplest possible language,
Hmm.
because simplification of the language on the food labeling is also quite crucial here. It would definitely address the challenge that consumers often have, as in being confused when reading these labels. Therefore, what we encourage companies to do is really to, again, be more honest in the disclosure of the ingredients, do so in preferably simple terms, simple and direct terms, so that it's very clear to consumers. Um, and again, it doesn't have to be extremely complicated as well. Simply disclose how the product was obtained, whether there are synthetic ingredients or not.
Yeah. I think that's very clear. And I guess in terms of vitamins and minerals, something that we're trying to do at BioVit is start encouraging our customers to use the BioVit trust mark, which is that little, oh, that side, that little
Mhm.
circle there, which we're hoping is going to be a way for consumers to know that there are no artificial vitamins and minerals in a product. And you should see that coming out on products over the next few months, which is really exciting. So more things like that for companies who really want to be honest and transparent about what's in their products to have a way to really show that to consumers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. There aren't any more questions, I don't think. No. So that's great. Thank you so much for joining BioVit Live today, Antonio. It's been such a pleasure. It's been really interesting, and the work that Safe are doing is really impressive. So keep going, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much both for the invitation and the very interesting webinar. And
Thank you.
yes, good luck as well in your efforts.
Yes, we've got this. Thank you. All right. See you soon.
Thank you. Have a nice day.